Table.
Welcome to the Tech Table and the June update for Premiere Pro CC. We've added some great new features in this release, and in this overview video you'll see our new support for things like proxy workflows, enhancements when working with Adobe stock, secondary color support, and the Lumetri panel with new HSL controls. We've also got brand new preview controls for VR 360 video. And finally, for our international users, we now have added open captions support. We've even extended our hardware support for Premiere Pro CC by adding brand new surface control support for new items like the tangent ripple, which is amazing with the Lumetri color panel. Even newcomers on the scene for Premiere Pro with the palette version 2, which is a customizable control surface that adds a very unique workflow to anybody's desktop. And finally, we've added new support, as always, for cameras like the Red Raven and the Red Weapon 8K. And not to forget the new DJI X5 RAW D&G camera for people that are using Osmos or drones. We have a great lineup for you. Let's jump over to the Tech Table and check it out. One of the new choices you have with this version of Premiere Pro is when you create a new project, you can decide what happens with media when you import it into Premiere Pro. So let me show you how this works. By clicking on New Project and then the Ingest Settings tab, you'll see a checkbox called Ingest with 4 options. And one of the key things to remember is on any of these options is you can continue to edit while any of these 4 processes are going on. The copy option allows you to copy the media as it is to a new location. For example, this is typically used to transfer camera footage from a movable media onto your local hard drive. The transfer path is specified by the primary destination option available in the settings. After the media has finished copying, the clips in the project will point to these new copies of the files. The transcode option allows you to transcode the media to a new format in a new location. For example, this can be used to transcode original camera footage to a specific location used within a post-production facility. The file path is specified by the primary destination option in settings, and the format is specified by the chosen encode preset. After the media has been transcoded, the clips in the project point to these transcoded copies of the files. Use the Create Proxy option to create and attach proxies to the media. For example, this is typically used to create lower resolution clips for increased performance during editing, which can then be switched back to the original full resolution files for final output. The file path where the proxies are generated is specified by the proxy destination option in the settings, and the format is specified by the chosen encode preset. After the proxies have been generated, they are automatically attached to the clips in the project. One thing to note is that we have created a few different types of ingest presets for you depending on whether or not you need them for just transcoding and you want the various settings to match the original format, or if you need an ingest preset to create proxies where the frame size and the file size will result in better overall performance on your hardware or even your network. You will notice that as I switch from Create Proxies to Transcode, that the preset list changes with different choices. The file will be the same frame size as the original, but use a different codec as you see here. Again, these are using the Match Source Settings feature. When I select Create Proxies, you will see that we also list a specific frame size that will be rendered. Take the time to look at the summary comments section as it explains all of the settings in the preset, and there are quite a few to be aware of. These summaries can also help you create your own additional presets. As you can see here, if your frame size is 6K, which is 6144 by 3160, for this preset we divide the horizontal and the vertical dimensions by 4, which gives you the 1536 by 790 that you see listed. This ensures that when you switch out the proxy for the high res, there's no shift in the video or black bars being displayed when you switch on the proxy. I created my own 720 preset, which includes a burned-in watermark Adobe logo. I'll show you how to create your own presets towards the end of this section. By clicking on the Add Ingest Preset button, you can add presets that were previously created. You'll also notice there is a PNG file in the folder, which is the graphic that I used to create my Adobe Proxy watermark. Under the last pull down, Proxy Destination, you have a couple of different choices for where you want your proxies to be located. The default is same as project, which is going to store the proxies next to your project file, or if you happen to have set up a destination in Adobe Media Encoder and save that as part of your preset settings, you can use the preset destination choice. Or one of the ones that I find myself using a lot is saving the files to my Creative Cloud folder, which allows me to use that media from another location, or if it's a shared folder, another user. As you start to bring media in, you'll see the automated process start. I'm going to go ahead and right mouse click and import this one file, and you'll see it's added it to my project here. And at this point I can go ahead and drag it to my timeline and immediately start editing with it.
This is fun, it never gets old, and it's something you can't do on Earth.
And you'll notice if I go under Window Progress, you'll see it's already kicked off the proxy process for me, and I'm free to go in and start adding additional clips to my project. Every time I add another clip, it's added to my project here, and you'll notice it's starting to queue those up. Now what's happening in the background is it's actually using Adobe Media Encoder to do all those red file conversions to 720p at the right aspect ratio for me. You'll also notice in my project folders that my project files are starting to appear. You see that we add the word proxy after the file name to help identify it. Remember that you can also change the proxy destination in the preset settings if you prefer a different location. Premiere Pro is also smart enough to know what's proxy media and what was the original file called. So to share some of that info with you, all I have to do is go under Properties, and when you look at the metadata, it gives you the details on the file. Plus, it also tells you if there's any associated proxy media and what that file is called. So this is information, again, you can help to manage your media. Now, what's the process to switch between proxy media and your high-res media? Well, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. One of the easiest ways to do it is just to click the new proxy button that we have in the button editor. So I'm going to go ahead and add that proxy button just by choosing the toggle proxy preset here. And you'll notice that when I now click this button, you'll see that logo pop up here. Again, the proxy logo appears because when I made that preset, I actually included an image to overlay, burn in there, so I know that that's a proxy. So now as I'm editing, you'll notice I get a very fluid experience. And the green indicator here will tell me that. You'll also notice that under the process that Adobe Media Encoder has paused that because I'm editing and I want all of my horsepower dedicated to making sure that this proxy file, even though it's a 720 file, is still in a 6K sequence. So again, we're managing a lot of this information for you, making sure that your machine is running at top performance. Now, this particular machine that I'm editing on right now is actually a standard Retina laptop, just a 15-inch Retina laptop, so 2013 model. So I'm not editing on any high-end piece of gear because I think this is a very typical machine that someone might be editing proxies with. Now, a couple of other things to note on proxies. You have a couple of different ways to look at proxies when you're working with your footage. And one of the things you might choose to do when you're looking at this footage is have a little bit more control. Let me jump over to another project and I'll show you what I mean. As I open up this next project, I wanted to point out that I'm using it on shared storage, which again I think is a very realistic workflow for proxy workflows, being able to store files in a central location and have multiple people on different types of machines have access to that footage. Today I'm using a QNAP 871, which is a great little server for small work groups. Another place you can find ingest settings, if you created a project that does not have ingest settings turned on, you can actually turn that on at any time you want just by going to Project Settings General, go to Ingest Settings, and you'll see the same tab that you saw under New Project Settings. You can also choose to create proxies on the fly after you've imported them. So you can right mouse click on any file, go to Proxy, Create Proxies. You can also see here that if you've already created proxies, or maybe there's another method in which you create proxies, either from a MAM or again someone else has created them for you, you can go ahead and attach those proxies that may not be associated with this project at this time. And you'll see the third choice where you can reconnect to the full res media. As I pointed out earlier, when I turn my proxies on by using the proxy button over here, you'll notice that I have a proxy logo under here, again, that I manually added, and I will show you to do that at the end of this section. How can I tell whether or not I have proxies attached? One of the useful ways you can do that is to go under the project menu here and choose Metadata Display. Under the metadata display, simply go to the Premiere Project Metadata, scroll down until you see Proxy, click OK. I'm going to take the project panel out full screen by hitting my toggle switch to full screen. And you'll see Proxy all the way here on the end, and I'm just going to move that right next to my project name, toggle that back down to the normal view, and you'll see where I've got all of my proxies attached. And if I see that there's a proxy that's not been attached, I've more than likely imported that particular file, and I can right mouse click and choose at this point to go ahead and create that proxy and just use one of the presets. And you'll see that it knows that there's a proxy associated, but it's offline at this point because the process is actually still happening. So if I look under the progress window here, you'll see it's actually creating that file while I'm editing. And finally, I'll show you how to create an ingest preset that you can use when you make your proxies. I'll also show you how I added the Adobe watermark that says Adobe Proxy to all of my clips, which again is part of my preset. Toggle the proxy button off, the watermark graphic goes away, and when I turn it on, the watermark graphic comes back. Again, it's just a quick way to tell because we actually do an amazing job at scaling up the proxy to match the original sequence size. Let's jump over to Adobe Media Encoder and I'll show you how to create these. Under the preset browser, click on the plus sign to start creating your preset. You first want to start with an encoding preset and choose a format that's going to best match your needs for, again, the system that you're working on. I'm going to go ahead and choose QuickTime. And under the video codec here, I have a number of different choices. I'll go select Cineform. And under my effects, I'm going to choose Image Overlay so I can use this as my watermark. I'll choose that file, which is this Adobe Proxy PNG that I created in Photoshop. And I'm going to want that to be down at the bottom right side. And I'll put that size at 25% with absolute sizing. And I'll set the opacity to about 40%. And choose any other settings that you would like as far as your encoding goes. I'm going to set this up to a 1280 720 file size as well. The next step is just to give the preset a name. And I always take the time to make a preset that has a little bit of information about what's going on there. And I always label it either encode or ingest, so it's easier to remember what type of preset it is. You can also go under comments and add some additional information there. And you'll see that my new encode preset comes up right here. Now let's go ahead and create a new ingest preset that we'll actually use to create the proxy. It tells the proxy settings what you want to do with the file as you're creating it. Are you going to copy it, or are you transcode it, or are you going to create a proxy and put other properties on it? Now you just click on Transcode Files, choose a format. I'll go ahead and choose QuickTime since that's what we based our encode preset on. And if you click the drop-down menu, you'll see all of the defaults that we ship with, and again, any presets that you create. And that's all there is to it for creating an ingest preset. If you want to import presets that you created earlier or that someone might have given you, you can go to the preset browser and click Import Presets, select those presets, and then click Open. You'll also notice in this same folder where I have these presets, the file that I used to create the Proxy watermark image is also located in this folder. It's a good idea to make sure that when you create those presets that you know where the graphic is and you can keep those files together so the encode process knows where the graphic is, because it will need that graphic when it goes to use it for encoding. Another enhancement that we've made to this version of Premiere Pro is through the Libraries panel when using Adobe stock. Now when you search for Adobe stock, and I'll go ahead and search for some NASA footage, you'll see you get a results from switch, which allows you to sort through different types of assets. So if I just click on the videos, it'll go ahead and search for NASA videos and tell me which ones are 4K and which ones are HD. And you can just go ahead and scan these. And when you find one that you like, click on the Save Preview. Now you can also choose which library it saves to or create a new library. I've created a library called NASA Footage, so I'm going to go ahead and save that preview to that folder, or again to that library. Once you have it in your library, you can right mouse click and either license it immediately, or you might just want to add it to your project so you can start to work with it. And you'll see Premiere Pro downloads this automatically from Adobe stock and adds it to your project. And now you have the ability to see what this looks like as well as using it directly in your project. If it's an asset that you want to go ahead and use and license, then all you have to do is click on the shopping cart button. You'll see you get an option to license the video, which will remove the watermark and give you the rights to use it. Let's jump over to the color workspace and take a look at the changes we've made in the Lumetri color panel. Here you'll see we've added a new section under HSL secondary color. And here you can isolate a color or a range of colors that you want to target to make a change to. In this case, I'm going to want to go ahead and select the green in this aurora here and change its color slightly. There's a number of ways to do this. You can use color pickers and set a color and add and remove colors, similar to what you would do in Photoshop. Or you can just use these presets up here that have a preset defined range of colors and start with those presets. I'm going to go ahead and pick green and then click on my color gray matte to start to isolate those colors out. From here you can adjust the sliders to expose the color that you're looking to change. Once you have the color selected or the range of colors selected, you have some other choices to refine that. I'm going to go ahead and just put a slight blur on this just to take that edge off. I'll go ahead and deselect the masking area, and just to show you, you have a number of different choices for how you might want to matte this out so you can really start to get a better idea of what you're affecting. At this point, now I'm free to go ahead and make the changes to that isolated area. So if I want to make this a little bluer and just give it a slight blue tint, I'm now able to come right back over here, and you'll notice that Aurora now takes on a slight blue tint. Again, this is great for making subtle changes or even changes where you might want to choose to change a color as an effect. So I'll give you an example. If I go to my effects controls, go to my HSL secondary, and maybe I'll add a couple keyframes to this color. I'll go ahead and start it out on that blue color, and by the time I get to the end, I might want to go ahead and change that maybe up here to this range, and you'll notice as the video plays, the aurora will change color over time. but just wanted to show you that you can really do some very interesting things when you isolate colors with the new HSL secondary color selection. I also want to take the time to point out the amount of work that engineering's done on the Lumetri scopes. You'll find that they're really high resolution and actually give you a number of additional choices. Under the color space type, you'll now see Rec 2020 available. You'll also notice that we've added brightness controls that will allow you to dim or brighten the scopes depending on your editing area. In some cases, we've had a lot of customers ask to be able to dim the scopes down just slightly because their rooms tend to be very dark, and now you've got an easy way to go in and control that. One of the features that's getting a lot of attention in this version of Premiere Pro is working with VR clips. In this version, we've introduced some new tools that will allow you to preview this as you start to work with it. So you don't have to work with it in an equirectangular format like you see here. And if you're not familiar with that, multi-camera rigs will use multiple cameras. You then add those to a stitching program, and there's a number of those out there. Once you stitch it, you export it as an equirectangular, which is the image that you see here on the screen. And as you scrub it, it's basically a flattened out version of the 360. Not really ideal to work with. One of the first things you're going to want to see what it looks like in its final form when you're looking at it in a VR viewer. Let's take a look at how we do that. You have a new VR control button that you can use under the button editor. And it's this button right here. I'm going to drag it right over here next to the Proxy button. And when you click on this, you'll go ahead and toggle to VR mode. Now, before you toggle to VR mode, you're going to want to go ahead and set your VR video settings to the settings on how your video was shot and how you want to monitor that. So there's really just a couple of settings. I happen to know that this is a mono video, so I'm going to go ahead and choose mono. And I know that it's a full 360 camera. Some cameras out there are 180 cameras, for example. And the monitor view that I want will be set at 90/60. You do have a number of different choices, so let me show you what a couple of those look like. So I'm going to click OK, and when I click on VR, you'll see that I'm now given this window that I can move my mouse around and sort of see what's going on in the 360 area. And of course, you can play the video and take a look at it as well. If I go back under the wrench again, and I choose settings, I can widen that area. So if I take it to say a 120/60, that's going to widen it by 2:1. So when I click on this, you'll notice as it plays, I'm now given more of an area that I can see. My suggestion is just play around with that viewer information and take a closer look at what you see. You can also edit your footage while you're in this preview mode, which is really handy again, so you can see in real time what you're editing. So if I go in and I make a cut on the timeline and I decide that I want to make a trim and then close this down so I can see the cut happen while I'm editing just as any other timeline. One of the things to be aware of when you're working in VR is being aware of effects, because a lot of effects will absolutely not work in VR because they're not designed that way. I'll give you an example. If you use something like a standard cross dissolve and you add that to your project, let's just move the time marker right in the middle of the dissolve. You'll start to see where the image just doesn't exactly work in VR space because it's already started to try to perform that dissolve for you. And you'll find this with a lot of the various effects. Some may work okay, but really you want to use effects that are designed for VR. We have a number of third-party partners that are already starting to create VR effects, and one of those partners is a third-party partner called Metal. So they have a product called Skybox, and I'm going to go ahead and show you just a couple of those and what they do. If I wanted to add something like a wipe, they have several different types of wipes. I'll go ahead and add their Mobius wipe. You'll start to see that as I scrub through this, it does a pretty good job of putting that in VR space. All the right things are happening here, which is exactly what you want to see. As you start to step through this, the VR process is actually starting to work. And they've done a really nice job with these plugins. Another thing you might want to be aware of is when you add titles. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a title to this. This is just a standard Adobe Premiere title. And you'll see the title is way up here on the top, and obviously the wrong things are starting to happen to that title by the way that I have the video displayed. So how do I deal with adding titles? So again, you go back to your effects panel and you'll see that there's a plugin by Skybox called Project 2D. You can just drag and drop this on there and you'll see that you have the title presented there. Go to your effects controls and decide what type of scaling you want on that title and whether or not you need that title to do anything like rotate. So let me just show you what starts to happen as you move this around. That actually looks like it's doing the right things. What happens if I want to add some keyframes to this? Just give you an idea. I'll just add a couple of very quick rotation keyframes to this. But as this starts to rotate, all of the right things are happening as I'm moving this thing around in VR space. So it looks really good as I start to come around. So if I come over here and I come all the way back around 360, that title is exactly where it should be. Again, all the right things happening in that 360 space. So I just want to make you aware of working with effects. And for right now, there's some great choices out there from our third-party partners. So make sure you go check some of those out. Now, one other thing we can do in VR is work with stereoscopic footage. And there's a really cool trick you can use as well by setting it to anaglyph. Let me show you how that works. The first thing you'll notice in this sequence, I have one video on track 1, but I have two videos that appear to be on top of each other in the program monitor. The stitching program that put this together rendered this out in an over-under stereoscopic output. Now you need to tell Premiere Pro's VR viewer what it is that you're looking at. So if you go under the wrench menu, go to VR Video Settings, you'll notice that we have a setting for stereoscopic over-under, and you can choose whether or not you just want to view that as the left eye or the right eye. So if I choose left eye and click OK, now I can edit this footage in just a standard mono view with all the stereoscopic information still there. Or if I want to view it in stereoscopic, I have the ability to go back to the settings and set that to anaglyph, and then I can wear the red-blue glasses, and it actually works amazingly well. And the image looks really, really great. So once you've got your settings set and you know that this looks right, it's time to export. And there's a couple of things you're going to want to know about export. Since this 360 project is fairly straightforward and also just has stereo audio, there's only a few simple things that you really need to know for export. Also keep in mind that exporting for VR 360 can sometimes involve more advanced audio setup where your sequence needs to be set up for multiple tracks or 5.1 to give you that true immersion experience that this new exciting medium brings us. Keep your eyes open for more detailed workflows on VR as we continue to bring you the best in Premiere Pro CC. Hit the subscribe button to ensure you stay connected. So let's go ahead and export this. I'm just going to go to File, Export Media. And I'm going to choose either H.264 or I'm going to choose H.265. H.264 is limited to 4K. A lot of what you'll see in VR and 360 video now is actually 8K wide. So when you need to go higher than 4K, just use H.265 or HEVC. So I'm going to go ahead and choose H.264 because as you see here, this is a 21 by 60 1080 image. And I'm going to move the slider all the way down at the bottom, and I'm going to tell Premiere on the export that this is VR video, so it adds the appropriate metadata. This allows the browser or the playback device to read the metadata on the file to tell it how to decode it, either as monoscopic or one of the stereo modes. Since this is mono, I'm going to go ahead and click it to mono. You can actually publish this directly either to Facebook, Vimeo, YouTube, or anything that supports VR video. And that's really all there is to it. In this new version of Premiere Pro, we've also extended our captions offering. As many of you know, we've had support for closed captions in the past, and now we've added open caption for our international customers. Let's take a quick look at how this works. You'll find that this works very similar to the closed caption workflow for those of you that had used it in the past. Just go to File, New, Captions. It'll automatically pick the appropriate video settings. And here you're just going to select from the standard pop-down list, Open Captions. Click OK, and now you'll notice it's added a new captions item in the project bin. When you double-click the captions item, you'll notice it automatically brings forward the captions panel. There's a number of ways you can do this, but one of the easiest ways to do it is just to set your out point to be the end of your timeline, which I happen to know mine is 5614, and that's now the length of my caption. You can create multiple caption streams depending on what you need. But for this example, I'm just going to use one. I'm going to jump back over to my project, and I'm going to grab the captions and I'm going to put it right on the timeline. And you see it's already extended to the entire length of that clip. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to the audio and then type what the person says.
Okay, copy that, Scott. And with that, if you are clear.
You also want to note the out point. Now I'm going to go ahead and I see my out point is 414, so I'm going to make the out point of this clip 414 just by typing 4:14 and hitting the return key. I'm going to go ahead and add that text, and then at that point hit the plus sign, and I'm ready for my next set of text. Now let's go back and see how this looks.
Okay, copy that, Scott. And with that, if you are clear.
And you'll see it disappears when it hits this number here. Now to make this easier, if you're going to be doing it in this very, very manual way, it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and type this out in a word processor, or what I've just used a note app here, and I've noted all of my times. So I'm going to go ahead and add all of these in here really quick. So to do this, all I have to do is copy 504 718 504 7.18 and paste, and now I'm ready for the next one. So if I wind this back and I see how it works.
And with that, if you are clear, we can give the go to.
And you can see it works exactly like you would expect it to. By just highlighting the text, you can do things like remove the background. So I can click on the background, take the opacity down to 0, and I might want to change my font to a heavier font, something that's a bit thicker. And let's bring the size up maybe to 100, make it easier to read. This is also really flexible compared to closed caption, which again is controlled by your television or your closed caption device. Open captions, again, much like subtitles, are very flexible. So you can create fonts, different colors, and pretty much have all of the controls that you see here. I'm also going to add this to the upper part of the screen to make it easier to see. And now when I wind this back, and you'll see it appears at the top.
Okay, copy that, Scott. And with that, if you are clear, we can give.
And you can also see that you can mix and match. So if I highlight this again, I can go in and just make the same adjustments. Maybe I'll put this one in the upper right, make that font a little bit bigger, and then wind that back and make sure that looks okay.
We can give the go to extend latches, I believe.
I'll go ahead and finish up the rest of these captions and show you a few more options. Now, as you'll see, I went ahead and typed in all of the time code as well as all of the text, and you'll start to see a number of things that I changed as I worked with the material. As I scrub through the timeline, you'll notice that some of the text is in blue. So you'll notice that they said standby, and then Scott answers, okay, copy. So when I go down to that part, you'll see that I have the ability to individually select text and make changes to it as well. I don't have to define the whole set of text as one parameter, so you can move things around. Even with all the flexibility you have in creating text like this, it's still a lot of work, and there's a much easier way to do all of this work, and that's to use a capture service. So one of the capture services I've used in the past is a company called rev.com. They charge $1 a minute to transcribe your video into various formats. Now, there is a couple things that you need to know. One of the things you need to know is you're essentially going to get back a closed caption file, at least from this company. There's a number of other companies that work. This company does closed captions. They do some subtitling. But the easiest way to do this is when you get your file back, either use an SRT, an SCC, an MCC, or a TXT file. These are standard closed caption files. We can easily convert those to open captions. Let me show you how that works. I have a closed caption file here, and if I put it on the timeline, in order to see closed captions, you actually have to enable the closed caption display. So I'm going to click on that toggle, which can be found in your button editor, and you'll see that closed caption looks exactly like closed captions would be. And if I double click on this, the editing is very similar. You just have a limited amount of choices because, again, closed captioning is controlled by hardware. Now, if you want to convert this, it's really easy. I'm going to click on this and take it off the timeline. And the first thing I would recommend is that you duplicate that asset and give that a different name. I'm going to go ahead and just call it open caption. That way I have a copy of that original closed captions in case I need it, because you can actually have both on the timeline, and you can turn the visual indicator on or off when you go to render. So you can render out open captions, which are burned in, versus closed captions, which again are controlled by the hardware device. So I'm now going to click on the open captions, go to modify captions, and you'll see we have a drop down box to change it. Now you can only change closed captions to open captions. Once you convert them, you can't go from open captions back to closed captions. So just remember that. So I'm going to click open captions, OK, and now this is an open captions. And by the way, this button here doesn't have any effect on open captions. That's strictly for closed captions. So now when I double click on this, I can just go right back in here and start to define what that looks like, just like I did before. So I can go in and pick any font that's in my system, go ahead and change my opacity in any setting that I need to. And again, maybe I'll just throw this up at the top, maybe make that a little bit larger, and bring that up on the top line, and you see it's going to work exactly like you need to. So again, using a capture service to create those closed captions you'll find is much easier, but if you need to and it's a short piece, go ahead and create that by hand just like I showed you. And again, you can always just use a word processor to get yourself on track and copy and paste, or there's even ways to save it as text files. There's a strict format that you can use and just type that in yourself. And that's a quick wrap on what's new in Premiere Pro CC for June 2016.